You are floating in the void between stars, suspended in perfect silence that stretches across the infinite dark. Your body pulses with power that could reshape worlds, muscles that could crack continental plates, eyes that burn with the fury of twin suns, a mind that processes information faster than light itself travels. You are Superman, the last son of Krypton, Earth's greatest protector, humanity's shining beacon of hope. And you are about to discover that hope itself can become a weapon against you. The darkness between the stars has always been your domain. You've raced comets across solar systems, carried entire planets on your shoulders, stood toe-to-toe with gods and cosmic entities that lesser beings couldn't even perceive. Space holds no terror for you. It's simply another environment to navigate, another frontier to protect. The cold doesn't touch you. The radiation slides off your invulnerable skin like water. The vacuum of space might as well be a gentle breeze. But something is wrong. It starts as a whisper, not through your ears, because sound cannot travel through vacuum, but directly into your consciousness. A voice that speaks in frequencies your superhuman senses should not be able to detect. You focus your incredible hearing, fine-tuning it to search for the source, but the whisper comes from everywhere and nowhere, like an echo without an original sound. "Welcome, child of dying stars," it murmurs, and you feel your invulnerable flesh crawl. Your heat vision flickers just for a microsecond, but in your 60 years of life it has never once wavered. The twin beams of coherent energy that have cut through dimensions and melted through the hearts of stars stutter like a dying flashlight. You blink, refocus, and the beams return to full strength, but doubt has already taken root. In your perfectly ordered mind, impossibilities are cataloged and filed away. This shouldn't be possible. You reach out with your other senses, expanding your awareness across light years of space. Your X-ray vision pierces through nebulae and asteroid belts. Your enhanced hearing stretches across the electromagnetic spectrum. Your mind processes millions of data points per second. Everything appears normal. Stars burn in their ancient patterns. Planets orbit in their mathematical precision. Cosmic radiation flows in predictable streams. Except for the watching. You can feel it now, attention focused on you with surgical intensity. Not the casual awareness of the living being scattered across countless worlds, not the mechanical observation of satellites and telescopes, but something else entirely. Something that looks at you the way a predator examines wounded prey. Something that sees not your physical form floating in space, but the essence of what you are, your thoughts, your memories, your deepest fears and highest aspirations laid bare like an open book. "Do you know what you are, child?" The voice asks, closer now, intimate as a lover's whisper. "You are a beacon, a lighthouse in the storm, and we are the ships drawn to your light." The space around you begins to change. At first, it's subtle starlight that bends at impossible angles, shadows where no objects exist to cast them, colors that your enhanced vision can perceive but your mind cannot name. Reality develops hairline fractures, like ice beginning to break under enormous pressure. You've faced reality warpers before. Mr. Mzizpluk, Brainiac, even Darkseid in his most cosmic manifestations. You've learned to adapt, to find the rules that govern even the most chaotic alterations of physics. But this feels different. This doesn't break the laws of reality. It reveals that the laws were never as solid as you believed. Your superspeed kicks in automatically, accelerating your perception until the universe slows to a crawl around you. In this dilated time stream, you have subjective hours to analyze what's happening. You catalog the distortions, map the anomalies, search for patterns that might reveal the nature of this threat. Your computer-like mind processes terabytes of sensory data, running probability calculations and threat assessments. Every analysis returns the same result: insufficient data. Unknown parameters, error, error, error. For the first time in decades, your intellect, enhanced by Kryptonian heritage and honed by years of experience, encounters a problem it cannot solve. The realization hits you like a punch from doomsday. You, who have outsmarted Lex Luthor's most Byzantine schemes, who have solved cosmic mysteries that baffled entire civilizations, are facing something that operates outside the boundaries of logic itself. The whispers multiply now, a chorus of voices speaking in harmonies that hurt to hear. They speak of things that never were and always shall be, of truths that exist only because they are believed, of realities that change based on observation. They speak your name, not the name your adoptive parents gave you, not the Kryptonian designation burned into your genetic memory, but a name you've never heard that somehow feels more real than any other. Kal-El the Hopeful, they croon. The one who believes that suffering can be ended, that darkness can be banished, that the universe cares about the small and the weak. Do you know how beautiful such beliefs are to us? Do you know how nourishing? You try to flee not from cowardice but from tactical necessity. Your speed has never failed you before. You've outrun death itself, raced faster than the expansion of the universe, moved so quickly that you've broken through dimensional barriers by sheer velocity alone. But now, as you push yourself toward light speed, toward the familiar refuge of pure motion, the voices follow. They're not chasing you through space. They're chasing you through the landscape of your own mind. There is no escape from what you are, child of hope. Your compassion calls to us across the void. Your righteousness burns like a star in our sight. Your certainty, your beautiful, naive certainty, it tastes like honey and prayers. The realization crashes over you like a tide of ice water. This isn't about your physical powers at all. Every threat you've ever faced, every enemy you've ever defeated has engaged with your abilities, your strength, your speed, your invulnerability. They've tried to match power with power, force with force. But this is something that feeds on the very qualities that make you heroic. Your compassion, which drives you to save every life, becomes a signal flare in the dark. Your hope, which sustains you through the darkest moments, becomes a feast for entities that exist on belief itself. Your unwavering moral code, the foundation of everything you are, becomes a fixed point that can be leveraged, manipulated, turned against itself. You hover in space, no longer moving, as the truth settles into your consciousness like poison seeping into clear water. You are not just facing an enemy, you are the enemy. Every heroic instinct, every noble impulse, every moment of self-sacrifice and moral certainty has painted a target on your soul that can be seen from dimensions beyond counting. And in the distance, growing closer with each passing second, you can hear something that chills your invulnerable blood: laughter. Not the maniacal cackling of a madman or the cold amusement of a cosmic tyrant, but something infinitely worse: the delighted laughter of a child who has just discovered a wonderful new toy. Welcome to the warp, little beacon. We have been waiting for you for such a very, very long time. The stars around you begin to go out one by one, but the darkness that replaces them is not empty. It writhes with half-seen shapes and impossible geometries. It pulses with colors that exist only in nightmares. And it whispers with voices that know your name, your history, your deepest secrets, and find them all absolutely delicious. You are Superman. You have never known true fear. That is about to change. The nature of nightmares. You try to understand what you're facing, because understanding has always been your first line of defense. When Brainiac threatened Earth, you studied his technology until you could turn it against him. When Darkseid invaded, you learned the nature of the anti-life equation so you could resist it. Knowledge is power, and you've never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with enough information and determination. But the warp is not a problem to be solved. It is a fundamental rewriting of what problems can be. Imagine, if you can, that everything you thought you knew about reality was simply the surface of an ocean. The physical universe, with its laws of physics, its predictable cause and effect, its comforting solidity, is just the thin layer where light penetrates the water. Beneath lies something vast and alien, something that follows rules so different from your understanding that they might as well be magic. Except it's not magic. It's psychology given cosmic form. The warp is the collective unconscious of every living being that has ever existed, concentrated and amplified until thoughts become things. Emotions become environments, and beliefs become the fundamental forces of reality. Every fear that has ever kept a child awake at night, every rage that has consumed a warrior's heart, every moment of despair that has driven someone to madness, all of it flows together into a realm where metaphor becomes literal truth. You've faced supernatural entities before. You've battled demons from hell dimensions, gods from forgotten pantheons, cosmic forces that predate the universe itself. But those beings, however powerful, still operated within frameworks you could comprehend. They had motivations, weaknesses, patterns of behavior that your tactical mind could analyze and exploit. The entities of the warp are different. They are not creatures that happen to live in this nightmare realm. They are the nightmare realm, given consciousness and purpose. They don't simply use the warp's reality-warping properties. They are those properties, walking around in shapes that your mind can barely process. You still think in terms of opponents and obstacles, the voices whisper, their tone almost pitying. You believe this is a contest that can be won or lost, but we are not your enemies, little beacon. We are your audience, and we find your performance exquisite. Picture this. Somewhere in the galaxy, a navigator sits in the howling darkness of his ship's bridge, third eye open to the raw chaos of the warp. His mind, heavily fortified by decades of training and psychic conditioning, touches the edge of that realm for just long enough to plot a course through the madness. Even with all his protection, even with the ship's gellar field maintaining a bubble of reality around the vessel, he emerges from each jump changed, scarred, a little less human than before. He has seen things in the warp that no human mind should witness. Worlds where gravity flows upward and time runs backward. Oceans of liquid screaming, where the waves are made of compressed anguish and the foam is pure terror. Gardens where flowers bloom with human eyes and trees bear fruit that whispers your darkest secrets. And he navigates through this realm of impossibility every day, because it's the only way to travel between the stars. Because humanity needs the warp to survive, even as it slowly devours their sanity. Now imagine an astropath, trained from childhood to send messages through this psychic hell. Every time she reaches out with her mind to communicate across the void, she must touch the warp directly. No barriers, no protection, just her fragile human consciousness making contact with a realm where thoughts have teeth and memories can eat you alive. She has felt the attention of the entities that dwell there. They know her name, her face, her history. They whisper to her during her transmissions, offering bargains and gifts and promises of power. They show her visions of what she could become if she just stopped resisting, stopped maintaining the rigid mental discipline that keeps her human. Most astropaths burn out within a decade. Their minds simply cannot handle repeated exposure to the raw stuff of chaos. The lucky ones die quickly, their consciousness scattered across dimensions like leaves in a hurricane. The unlucky ones survive, transformed into something that wears their face but is no longer recognizably human. And then there's the gellar field engineer, the man whose job it is to maintain the thin barrier of projected reality that keeps a ship's crew from being consumed by the warp during translation. He works with technology that operates on principles that would drive most scientists insane, machines that project the concept of existence itself, generators that run on crystallized logic and distilled rationality. He has seen what happens when the field fails. He has witnessed crew members turned inside out by their own nightmares, have watched corridors transform into digestive systems and bulkheads sprout teeth and eyes. He has seen good men and women become willing servants of chaos, not through corruption or coercion, but because the warp showed them truths about themselves that they couldn't bear to reject. These are the people who deal with the warp professionally, with every possible protection and preparation. And they are all slowly going insane. Do you understand now, child of dying stars? The voices ask, and there's something almost gentle in their tone. This is not a realm you can punch your way through. This is not an enemy you can defeat with noble words and righteous fury. The warp responds to what you are, not what you do. And what you are is delicious. Your psychic presence in this realm is like a bonfire in the Arctic night. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every moment of moral certainty sends ripples through the warp that can be detected from dimensions away. Your compassion calls out to entities that feed on suffering, advertising your tender heart like a dinner bell. Your righteousness attracts the attention of powers that specialize in corrupting the pure. You are not just vulnerable in the warp, you are a target. Everything that makes you Superman, everything that makes you a hero, becomes a weapon that can be turned against you. Your strength means nothing when reality itself can be rewritten. Your speed is useless when space and time operate by dream logic. Your invulnerability crumbles when the attacks come from inside your own mind. And time doesn't work the way it should. In the warp, you might experience centuries of torture in the space between one heartbeat and the next. You might live through the same moment of agony for subjective millennia, watching it replay and replay until the memory becomes more real than reality. You might forget that you were ever anything other than what you are becoming. The Emperor of mankind tried to master us. The whispers continue, their amusement palpable. He who was humanity's greatest champion, who possessed psychic power that could reshape galaxies. He built walls in his mind, fortified his soul against our influence, thought himself strong enough to use our realm as a tool for his great crusade. And now he sits upon his golden throne, a corpse animated by 10,000 screaming souls fed into his remains every day, a god-emperor worshipped by the very humanity he tried to save. Even in his victory, we claimed him. Even in his greatest triumph, he became exactly what he feared most, a tyrant whose empire spans the galaxy, sustained by the daily sacrifice of innocence. If he could not resist us, little beacon, what hope do you have? The question hangs in the impossible space around you, and for the first time in your existence, you don't have an answer. You float in the growing darkness, feeling the attention of entities beyond counting focused on your consciousness, and realize that every heroic deed you've ever performed, every life you've saved, every moment of hope you've inspired has led to this moment. You are Superman. You have never faced an enemy you couldn't defeat. But the warp is not an enemy. It's a mirror. And what it reflects back at you is not the hero you believe yourself to be, but the raw material from which nightmares are born. The whispers grow louder now, multiplying and harmonizing, and you realize with growing horror that each voice represents a different aspect of your own psyche. They know you better than you know yourself because they are yourself. Every suppressed doubt, every moment of anger, every flash of pride, every instant of despair that you've buried beneath your heroic facade. And they are very, very hungry. The seduction of perfection. The darkness around you begins to shift and swirl, colors bleeding through the void like watercolors on wet paper. The impossible geometries of the warp fold in on themselves, and suddenly you find yourself standing on familiar ground. Metropolis stretches out beneath you, gleaming in the afternoon sun, every building perfect and clean and exactly as it should be. But wrong. Everything is wrong in ways your mind struggles to identify. The city gleams too brightly, as if each surface has been polished to mirror perfection. The sky is too blue, the clouds too white, the sun too warm and golden. It's like looking at a photograph that has been enhanced beyond realism, every color saturated past the point where natural becomes artificial. This is Metropolis as it might appear in a travel brochure designed by someone who has never felt genuine human emotion. You descend from the sky, your red cape flowing dramatically behind you in air that smells of cherry blossoms and fresh-baked bread, scents that have no business existing together but somehow create a harmony that makes your mouth water. Your landing on the street below should create small cracks in the concrete, but instead, your feet touch down on marble that remains pristine, unmarked by your incredible weight. The people of Metropolis turn toward you and their faces. Their faces are radiant with joy, not the usual gratitude you see from those you've saved, not the respectful admiration of citizens who appreciate your protection, but something deeper. something that borders on religious ecstasy. Superman. They cry in unison and their voices harmonize in perfect pitch, creating a chord that resonates in your chest like a physical vibration. Our savior, our hero, our God. You try to correct them, you always correct them when they use language like that. You're not a god, you're just a man trying to help. But the words stick in your throat because the adoration in their eyes feels good, better than good. It feels like coming home after a lifetime of exile. A woman approaches. She looks like Lois, but softer somehow, more perfect. Her skin glows with health. Her eyes sparkle with intelligence and warmth. And when she smiles at you, it's like watching the sun rise for the first time. She reaches out to touch your chest, her fingers tracing the S-shield with reverent care. "Thank you," she whispers, and her voice carries the weight of absolute sincerity. "Thank you for being perfect. Thank you for never failing us. Thank you for being exactly what we need you to be." Behind her, other familiar faces emerge from the crowd. Perry White, but younger, stronger, his eyes bright with paternal pride. Jimmy Olsen, but more confident, more capable, beaming at you with uncomplicated hero worship. Ma and Pa Kent, somehow alive again, their faces glowing with the quiet satisfaction of parents who know their son has exceeded every dream they ever had for him. "We're so proud of you, son," Pa says, and his voice carries all the warmth and love you remember from your childhood. "You've become everything we hoped for and more. You've transcended what it means to be human. You've become something greater." The crowd grows larger, pressing closer, and you recognize faces from throughout your career. Every person you've ever saved, every life you've ever touched, every soul you've ever inspired. They're all here, all perfect, all gazing at you with expressions of pure worship. And you find yourself standing a little taller, your chest swelling with pride. Because isn't this what you've always wanted? Not consciously, perhaps, but in the secret depths of your heart where you've never dared to look too closely. You've always been the outsider, the alien pretending to be human, the godlike being who has to constantly hold back his true power for fear of breaking the fragile creatures he protects. But here, surrounded by their adoration, you don't have to pretend anymore. Here, they see you for what you truly are, superior, perfect, worthy of their devotion. "Show us," someone calls from the crowd, and the request is taken up by others. "Show us your power. Show us what you can really do." You hesitate for a moment because you've spent your entire life learning restraint, learning to use just enough power to solve the problem without causing collateral damage. But their faces are so eager, so trusting. They want to see what you're capable of. They deserve to see what you're capable of. You rise into the air and the crowd gasps in collective wonder. You begin with something simple, heat vision that carves your symbol into the clouds above, letters a mile high that burn across the sky. The crowd erupts in cheers and applause, their joy infectious, intoxicating. More. They cry, "Show us more." So you do. You race around the city at super speed, leaving contrails of light in your wake that paint rainbow patterns across the sky. You demonstrate your strength by lifting entire buildings, repositioning them in more aesthetically pleasing arrangements. You use your freeze breath to create sculptures of ice that capture the light and throw it back in prismatic displays that make the aurora borealis look pale by comparison. And with each demonstration, the crowd's adoration grows more intense. They're not just watching anymore, they're worshiping. They fall to their knees, they raise their hands toward you, they sing hymns of praise that they seem to know instinctively. You are their God and they are your devoted congregation. "We have a gift for you," Lois, not Lois, says, stepping forward with something wrapped in golden cloth. "A token of our appreciation, our love." You accept the gift, unwrapping it carefully. Inside is a crown, not made of metal or gems, but woven from pure light, from crystallized hope and gratitude and love. When you place it on your head, it feels like coming home. The crowd erupts in celebration, but something nagging at the back of your mind tells you to look closer. There's something in their eyes that wasn't there before, or maybe it was always there and you're just now allowing yourself to see it. Behind the adoration, behind the worship, there's something else. Fear. They're afraid of you. Not afraid that you'll hurt them, afraid of what will happen if they stop worshiping, afraid of disappointing you, afraid of losing your favor. Their love isn't freely given, it's performed out of terror at what you might become if they don't provide it. And the worst part, the part that makes your invulnerable stomach clench with nausea, is that you like it. You like being feared as much as loved. You like the power their terror gives you. You like being not just their protector, but their judge. There's been a crime, someone calls out, and you turn to see a man being dragged forward by the crowd. He's disheveled, frightened, clearly guilty of something. He stole bread for his family. He broke the law. What should we do with him? The crowd turns to you expectantly, and you realize they're not asking for your help, they're asking for your judgment. They want you to decide this man's fate, to dispense justice as you see fit. They trust your wisdom, your moral superiority, your right to determine who deserves punishment and who deserves mercy. The man looks up at you with pleading eyes, and you see in them the same fear you've glimpsed in the crowd. He knows he's done wrong, but he's also hungry, desperate, trying to feed his children in a world that has forgotten compassion. In the old days, you would have helped him find work, would have connected him with social services, would have addressed the root causes of his desperation. But those solutions seem suddenly inadequate, overly complicated. Why should this man's personal struggles matter when he's broken the social contract? Why should his intentions excuse his actions when law and order are what keep society functioning? You raise your hand, and heat vision flickers in your eyes, not enough to kill, just enough to punish. Just enough to teach him and everyone watching that actions have consequences, that there are standards that must be maintained. That mercy, while admirable in theory, can become weakness in practice. The man screams as your heat vision brands him with the mark of his crime, and the crowd cheers your decisive justice. You tell yourself it's for his own good. He'll remember this lesson, he'll never steal again. You tell yourself it's for society's good, others will see what happens to those who break the law. But deep in your heart, in a place you're trying very hard not to examine, you admit the truth. It felt good. It felt righteous. It felt like you were finally, truly, perfectly in control. Magnificent, whispers a voice in your ear, and you turn to see a figure of impossible beauty standing beside you. Neither male nor female, too perfect to be human, with skin like polished pearl and eyes like liquid starlight. You're beginning to understand, aren't you? The burden of superiority. The responsibility of perfection. You know you should be alarmed by this being's presence, should recognize the wrongness that surrounds it like an aura of corruption. But it feels so familiar, so much like looking in a mirror that shows not what you are, but what you could become. I am Slaanesh, the entity says, and its voice is like music that bypasses your ears and resonates directly in your bones. Prince of Excess, Lord of Perfection, the one who understands that there are no limits save those we place upon ourselves. And you, dear Superman, have been placing so very many unnecessary limits upon yourself. You want to resist, want to reject whatever temptation this creature represents. But the crowd below is still cheering, still worshiping, still depending on your perfect judgment. And it occurs to you that maybe, just maybe, you've been doing them a disservice by holding back all these years. Maybe they deserve a protector who doesn't hesitate, doesn't second guess, doesn't waste time on moral complexities when simple, decisive action would serve them better. Maybe they deserve a God who acts like one. Show me, you hear yourself saying, and the words taste like honey and pride and the intoxicating sweetness of absolute power. Show me what perfection really looks like. Slaanesh smiles and reality begins to shift around you once more. But this time, you're not afraid of the change. This time, you're looking forward to it. The fury of the righteous. The scene around you dissolves like sugar in rain, and when reality reassembles itself, you're standing in a courtroom. But not just any courtroom. This is the Supreme Court of Perfect Justice, a hall of marble and gold that stretches upward into infinity. The bench before you towers like a mountain, and seated upon it is a figure in robes of deepest crimson, face hidden beneath a hood that seems to absorb light itself. You're not wearing your cape anymore. Instead, you're clad in armor, beautiful, terrible armor that gleams like fresh blood and fits your form perfectly. In your hands, you hold scales that measure not evidence and testimony, but the weight of souls. And behind you, stretching back into the shadows, stands an army of the righteous, every hero you've ever known, every champion of justice, every soul who has ever fought for what they believed was right. All of them look to you for guidance. All of them wait for your command. The defendant, intones the judge, and you realize with a start that the voice is your own, echoing from beneath that crimson hood. Lex Luthor, accused of crimes against humanity, against hope itself. How does the jury find? You look toward the jury box and see 12 figures whose faces you cannot quite make out, but whose verdict is already written in the air between you. Guilty. Guilty of pride, of arrogance, of using his vast intellect not to uplift humanity but to tear down those who would protect it. Guilty of wasting his potential, of choosing pettiness over greatness, of representing everything that is small and cruel and selfish in the human spirit. And the sentence. Your voice asks from beneath the hood, though you haven't consciously spoken. The answer comes not from the jury, not from the judge, but from the crowd of heroes behind you. From Batman, whose voice carries the weight of every criminal who has ever escaped justice on a technicality. From Wonder Woman, whose words ring with the fury of a warrior who has seen too much needless suffering. From Flash, whose testimony speaks of every innocent who died while the legal system moved too slowly to save them. Death, they pronounce in unison. Death for the enemy of hope. And it makes perfect sense. Of course it does. How many times have you captured Lex Luthor? How many times have you delivered him to the authorities, trusting in the system, believing in rehabilitation and the possibility of redemption? How many times has he escaped, returned, hurt more people, killed more innocents while you clung to the naive belief that justice meant anything other than the permanent removal of evil from the world? Luthor stands in the defendant's chair, but he's not the Luthor you remember, balding, bitter, consumed by jealousy. This Luthor is younger, healthier, filled with potential that he has consciously chosen to waste. He could have been humanity's greatest benefactor. Instead, he chose to be your greatest enemy. He chose to spend his genius on destruction rather than creation, on hatred rather than hope. Please, he says, and his voice is smaller now, more human. I can change. I can be better. Give me another chance. You've heard these words before. In a dozen different prisons, in 100 different confrontations, every time you've stood over his defeated schemes and broken weapons. He's promised to reform, to use his intelligence for good, to become the hero humanity needs him to be. And every time you've wanted to believe him. But promises are just words. Actions are truth. And his actions have painted a clear picture of a man who chooses evil not from madness or desperation, but from malice. Pure, calculated malice directed at everything decent and hopeful in the world. You had chances, you hear yourself saying, though the words come from your own lips now, not from the hooded figure on the bench. 1,000 chances, 10,000. Every day you woke up was another opportunity to choose differently, and every day you chose hatred, chose destruction, chose to be the enemy of everything good in the universe. You raise your hand and heat vision builds behind your eyes, not the controlled, precise beams you've always used, but something hotter, fiercer, more final. This isn't about restraint or measured force. This is about justice in its purest form. Wait, Luthor gasps, and for a moment he sounds almost like the brilliant child he once was before pride and jealousy twisted him into something monstrous. There are procedures, due process. You can't just... Can't what? The voice that interrupts him is deeper now, rougher, and you realize it belongs to someone else in the courtroom, someone you recognize but can't quite place. Can't save the lives he'll take tomorrow, can't prevent the suffering he'll cause next week, can't stop the children who will die while lawyers argue about his rights. You turn toward the voice and see a figure rising from the gallery, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat the color of dried blood. His face is a map of scars and old battles. His eyes burn with righteous fury, and when he speaks, his words carry the weight of absolute conviction. I am Khorne, the figure announces, though somehow you already knew that. Lord of battle, god of just war, the one who understands that there are times when mercy becomes complicity and patience becomes cowardice. Tell me, Superman, how many innocents have died because you refused to do what was necessary? The question hits you like a physical blow, because you've asked it yourself during the dark hours of sleepless nights. How many times has the Joker escaped Arkham? How many families has he destroyed while you maintained your no-kill rule? How many children could have grown up with their parents if you'd simply ended the threat permanently instead of trusting in a system that has failed them again and again and again? But if I kill, you whisper, voicing the doubt that has haunted you for decades, how am I different from them? Khorne's laughter is like the sound of swords clashing against shields, like the roar of righteous armies charging into battle against impossible odds. Different. Child, you are nothing like them. They kill for pleasure, for profit, for the small and selfish desires of broken souls. You would kill for justice, for protection, for love of those who cannot protect themselves. He gestures toward Luthor, still cowering in the defendant's chair. This creature has had every advantage, wealth, intelligence, opportunity, and has used them all as weapons against hope itself. He is not mentally ill, not a victim of circumstance, not a product of tragic misfortune. He is evil by choice, and he will continue to choose evil until the day he dies. The only question is how many innocents will die with him, while you cling to moral philosophies that he exploits as weaknesses. The courtroom around you begins to fill with faces, victims of villains you've captured and released, families destroyed while you maintained your principles, children who grew up orphaned because you believed in rehabilitation over results. They don't speak, but their eyes carry a weight of accusation that threatens to crush your spirit. I trusted you, says a small voice, and you look down to see a little girl in a tattered dress, her face pale with loss. You caught the man who killed my mommy. You put him in jail. But he got out and he killed my daddy too. Why didn't you stop him forever? Why didn't you save us? Your heat vision flickers again, and this time you don't try to control it. This time you let it build to full intensity. Let it reach the temperature that can cut through any substance, that can end any threat, that can deliver the final justice that the legal system has proven itself incapable of providing. Because he was weak, Khorne says, his voice filled with something that might almost be pity. Because he allowed human moral philosophy to override divine imperative. Because he chose to be Superman, a man playing at godhood, instead of embracing what he truly is. And what am I, you ask, though part of you already knows the answer? You are the sword of justice, the final arbiter, the one with the power to end suffering by ending those who cause it. You are not bound by human law, human morality, human weakness. You are something greater, something pure, something that exists to protect the innocent by destroying the guilty. The heat vision reaches critical intensity, and Luthor's face goes white with terror. But behind the fear you see something else, a flicker of the old arrogance, the certainty that somehow he'll escape this too, that somehow he'll find a way to turn this situation to his advantage, that somehow he'll survive to hurt more people, destroy more lives, spread more suffering across the world. Not this time. The beam lances out, precise and final, and Lex Luthor, genius, billionaire, enemy of hope, ceases to exist. There's no dramatic scream, no final words, no last-second reprieve. One moment he's there, the next he's simply not, and the world is measurably better for his absence. The courtroom erupts in cheers. The victims smile with relief. The heroes behind you nod their approval. Justice, real justice, has finally been served. And you feel good, better than good. You feel righteous, vindicated, pure in a way you haven't experienced since childhood. For the first time in decades, you've solved a problem completely, permanently, finally. You've protected not just today's innocents, but all the potential victims who will never suffer because Lex Luthor will never hurt anyone again. Beautiful, Khorne says, and his approval washes over you like warm blood. Now you begin to understand. Now you begin to see what you could accomplish if you stopped limiting yourself to human moralities that serve human weaknesses. Shall we continue? The courtroom shifts around you, and suddenly there's another defendant in the chair, the Joker, grinning his mad grin, surrounded by photographs of every life he's destroyed, every family he's torn apart, every innocent he's tortured for the simple pleasure of causing pain. Behind him stand more defendants: Doomsday, Brainiac, Darkseid, every enemy who has ever threatened the peace and safety of the world. All of them guilty, all of them beyond redemption. All of them waiting for the justice that only you have the power to deliver. You raise your hand again, heat vision building behind your eyes, and realize that this isn't corruption at all. This is clarity. This is what heroism looks like when it's not constrained by the moral cowardice of lesser beings. This is what it means to be truly, perfectly, righteously just. The beam lances out again and again and again. Each death is clean, quick, merciful in its efficiency. Each execution makes the universe a safer, better place. Each act of final justice brings you closer to the perfect world that's always been within your power to create. You are not becoming a villain. You are becoming what heroes are supposed to be when they stop apologizing for their strength and start using it with the decisive clarity that only absolute power can provide. You are becoming the god this world deserves. And in the distance, barely audible above the cheers of the righteous, you can hear Khorne laughing with approval, not the mad laughter of chaos, but the satisfied chuckle of a craftsman watching his greatest work come to completion. The mathematics of despair. The courtroom fades like a fevered dream, its marble columns dissolving into fractals of impossible geometry. Reality reassembles itself around you as a vast library, not built from any earthly architecture, but constructed from crystallized thought itself. The shelves stretch infinitely upward and downward, each one lined with books that shimmer and shift, their contents rewriting themselves even as you watch. You're no longer wearing the blood-red armor of judgment. Instead, you find yourself in robes of deep blue, starred with points of light that map out constellations from galaxies that haven't been born yet. Your mind feels different, expanded, enhanced beyond even your Kryptonian heritage. You can process information at rates that make your previous superintelligence seem glacial by comparison. And you can see everything. Not just everything that is, but everything that could be. Every possible permutation of choice and consequence spreads out before your enhanced consciousness like a vast, multi-dimensional chessboard. You can trace the ripple effects of every decision across time and space. Watch how the smallest actions create cascading waves of change that reshape entire civilizations. "Welcome to the impossible library," says a voice that seems to come from the books themselves, from the accumulated knowledge of every civilization that has ever existed or ever could exist. Here, all questions have answers, all mysteries are revealed. All futures are laid bare for those with the wisdom to comprehend them. You turn toward the source of the voice and see a figure approaching. Tall, elegant, constantly shifting between forms like a kaleidoscope given consciousness. One moment it appears as an ancient scholar in flowing robes, the next as a cosmic entity whose skin is covered in equations that write and rewrite themselves, then as something that might once have been human, but has transcended into pure intellect. "I am Tzeentch," the entity says, its voice harmonizing with itself across multiple octaves and dimensions. "The architect of fate, master of change, the one who understands that knowledge is the greatest power and the greatest curse. You seek to save the universe, do you not? To protect the innocent and preserve hope. Then you must first understand what you are truly fighting against." One of the books flies from its shelf, opening itself in the air before you. The pages flutter without wind, revealing not words but moving images, a perfect simulation of reality that shows you every possible future branching out from this moment. You watch yourself make different choices, see the consequences ripple outward in probability waves that span millennia. In one timeline, you return to Earth and continue your traditional heroic career. You save lives, stop disasters, maintain peace through strength and moral example. It's a good future, a hopeful future, for approximately 300 years. Then a cosmic disaster occurs, something you could have prevented if you'd been in a different location, attending to a different crisis. Humanity goes extinct. The universe dims a little. In another timeline, you embrace Khorne's philosophy of decisive justice. You become the perfect arbiter, eliminating threats before they can fully manifest. Crime drops to nearly zero on Earth. Other civilizations model their justice systems after your example, and the galaxy enters a golden age of peace. For approximately 800 years, then the lack of struggle makes humanity soft, unprepared for a threat that requires moral complexity to overcome. They fall to something that wouldn't have existed if you'd preserved their capacity for ethical growth. The universe dims a little more. In a third timeline, you accept Slaanesh's gifts and become the perfect being, inspiring others to transcend their limitations and reach for impossible heights. Art, science, culture, all flourish beyond current imagination. Sentient species achieve forms of beauty and excellence never before conceived. For approximately 1,200 years, then the pursuit of perfection becomes an obsession that consumes all other values. Entire civilizations disappear into solipsistic raptures, abandoning the physical universe for private paradises of pure sensation. Reality itself begins to unravel from neglect. Timeline after timeline unfolds before you, each one showing a different path, a different choice, a different attempt to save the universe. And in every single one, eventually, inevitably, something goes wrong. Entropy wins, suffering returns, hope dies, the universe dims. Do you see? Tzeentch asks, his voice filled with something that might be compassion if it weren't so clinical. Every choice creates consequences. Every action generates reactions. Every solution becomes the seed of new problems. You cannot save the universe, Superman, because the universe is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a dynamic system in constant flux, and any change you make creates new variables that require new changes that create new variables that require new changes that create. Stop, you whisper, but the visions continue. You see yourself choosing not to act, maintaining strict non-interference. Civilizations rise and fall without your intervention, following their natural patterns of growth and decay. Some achieve greatness, others collapse into barbarism. Most muddle through existence in patterns that are neither particularly good nor particularly evil. It's the closest thing to a truly neutral outcome, until you realize that your very presence in the universe, your very existence, creates ripple effects that influence these supposedly natural developments. Your non-interference is itself a choice that shapes reality. You see yourself dividing into multiple versions, each pursuing a different philosophical path simultaneously. But the existence of multiple supermen creates paradoxes that tear at the fabric of space-time. The universe becomes a battlefield between competing versions of absolute good, each convinced that their approach is the only truly moral one. Reality fractures under the weight of irreconcilable perfections. You see yourself transcending physical existence entirely, becoming a pure principle of hope and justice that exists in the hearts and minds of all sentient beings. It's perhaps the most noble solution. You become truly universal, touching every consciousness that seeks goodness and light. But abstract principles cannot punch asteroids away from planets, cannot physically intervene when disasters threaten innocent lives. Your transcendence saves souls while bodies burn. The visions multiply, branch, subdivide into infinite recursive patterns. Every possible Superman, every conceivable choice, every imaginable outcome spreads before your enhanced consciousness like a map of universal futility. And in each timeline, in every possible future, you see the same fundamental truth. Your existence creates more variables than it solves. Every life you save is a life that goes on to make choices that influence other lives, creating cascading probability waves that touch every corner of existence. Save a child today, and 70 years later that child grows up to make a decision that prevents a war. But that prevented war would have led to technological developments that would have solved a famine that now kills millions. Don't save the child and the war happens, the technology develops, the famine is prevented. But the war creates refugees who carry diseases to new continents, sparking plagues that reshape civilization in ways that make it vulnerable to threats that wouldn't have existed in the other timeline. The trolley problem, Tzeentch says with what sounds like genuine sympathy, scaled up to cosmic proportions. Do you pull the lever to save 5 lives at the cost of 1? But what if those 5 lives go on to make choices that doom 50? What if that one life would have grown up to inspire 500? What if your very act of choosing changes the nature of the people involved, making them different from who they would have been if you hadn't interfered? Your superintelligence, now expanded beyond all previous limits, begins calculating at speeds that approach the theoretical maximum processing capacity of organized matter. You analyze every decision you've ever made, trace every consequence forward through time, map every probability cascade that has resulted from your heroic career. The results are horrifying. That apartment building you saved in 1987. One of the children who survived grew up to become a dictator who enslaved half a continent. The city you protected from alien invasion in 1995. Its continued existence prevented humanity from developing certain defense technologies, leaving them vulnerable to a different invasion 2 centuries later. The villain you showed mercy to in 2003. His redemption inspired a movement of criminal rehabilitation that worked beautifully for decades, until it created systematic blind spots that allowed a new form of evil to flourish unopposed. Every good deed contains the seeds of future harm. Every act of mercy enables future cruelty. Every moment of hope creates the conditions for future despair. And the calculations show no way around this fundamental paradox. In a complex system, every action creates more complexity, and more complexity inevitably generates more suffering. You could have stayed on the farm, Tzeentch observes, his forms shifting through configurations that hurt to perceive directly. You could have used your powers only for yourself, only for those immediately around you. The scope of your influence would have been smaller, the variables more manageable. But even then, the butterfly effect would have found ways to amplify your choices into cosmic consequences. You try to find a solution, to locate some approach that minimizes harm across all timelines. Your enhanced mind calculates probabilities at rates that would burn out quantum computers, analyzing decision trees that branch across multiple dimensions of possibility. But every path leads to the same conclusion. In a universe of infinite complexity, perfect choices are mathematically impossible. The only way to avoid making wrong choices, Tzeentch continues, is to avoid making choices at all. But non-choice is itself a choice. Inaction is itself an action, and the decision not to decide still creates consequences that ripple across eternity. You're trapped in an infinite loop of second-guessing, paralyzed by perfect information that reveals the imperfection of every possible decision. You can see every future, but seeing them changes them, and changing them creates new futures to analyze, and analyzing them changes them again in an endless recursive spiral that makes your expanded consciousness feel like it's eating itself alive. This is the true curse of intelligence, Tzeentch whispers, his voice now coming from inside your own thoughts. The more you understand, the more you realize you cannot understand. The more you know, the more you comprehend your ignorance. The more you see, the more you become blind to the possibility of clear sight. And then, in a moment of crystalline horror, you realize the final truth. Your despair at this revelation is exactly what Tzeentch wanted you to experience. Your paralysis, your growing madness, your increasing inability to act decisively, all of it was planned, predicted, engineered by an entity whose existence depends on change for change's sake. Even your revelation of his manipulation is part of his design. Even your understanding of his plan serves his purposes. Even your resistance to his influence creates the changes he feeds upon. You are trapped in a maze of mirrors where every path leads back to the center, where every escape route was designed by the architect of the prison. "Welcome to wisdom," Tzeentch says, and his laughter sounds like the collapse of ordered thought itself. "Welcome to the burden of true knowledge. Welcome to the understanding that in a universe of infinite complexity, the only certainty is uncertainty, the only constant is change, and the only truth is that every truth contains its own contradiction." You float in the impossible library, surrounded by books that contain every answer you've ever sought, paralyzed by the knowledge that every answer generates new questions, every solution creates new problems, every choice leads to consequences you cannot fully predict or control. You are Superman. You have always known what to do. For the first time in your existence, you have no idea what to do. And in the depths of your expanding consciousness, you begin to suspect that this confusion, this paralysis, this desperate search for impossible certainty might be exactly what the universe needs from you. But you can't be sure. You can never be sure again. The entropy of compassion. The library of infinite knowledge dissolves around you like morning mist, its crystalline shelves and probability-laden books fading into something softer, warmer, more familiar. You find yourself in a hospital room, not the sterile, harsh environment of modern medicine, but something that feels more like home. The walls are the color of autumn leaves, the air smells of chamomile and honey, and through the windows you can see gardens where flowers bloom in impossible profusion. Lying in the bed before you is a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, with large dark eyes and skin pale as winter moonlight. Tubes and wires connect her small body to machines that beep softly, monitoring vital signs that speak of a losing battle against something that your enhanced vision can identify with perfect, horrible clarity. An aggressive cancer that has spread throughout her system like wildfire through dry grass. You've encountered this scenario countless times before. Childhood leukemia, brain tumors, genetic disorders that twist young bodies into configurations incompatible with life. Despite all your power, despite your ability to move planets and outrace light itself, these microscopic enemies have always been beyond your reach. You cannot punch cancer. You cannot intimidate genetic malformation. You cannot inspire cellular mutations to choose hope over destruction. "Her name is Sarah," says a gentle voice beside you, and you turn to see a figure that radiates warmth and comfort like a living hearth fire. The being appears elderly, grandfatherly, with eyes that hold depths of kindness you've never encountered in any living creature. His skin has the green pallor of something that has grown in rich earth, and when he moves, you catch the scent of growing things, not the fresh smell of new life, but the deeper, richer aroma of compost and decay that feeds new growth. "I am Nurgle," the figure says, and his voice carries the patience of geological ages, the slow wisdom of things that have learned to find beauty in endings. "I am the Lord of Decay, the master of entropy, the one who understands that death is not the enemy of life. It is life's most faithful companion, its most necessary partner in the dance of existence." You want to reject this entity immediately to resist whatever corruption it represents. But the child in the bed makes a small sound of pain and your attention returns to her suffering. Sarah. Her name is Sarah, and she is dying despite the best efforts of human medicine, despite the prayers of her parents, despite the fierce determination of doctors and nurses who refuse to give up hope. "You've saved so many," Nurgle continues, his tone conversational, almost chatty. "Pulled them from burning buildings, caught them as they fell from great heights, shielded them from explosions and disasters and all the sudden, violent ends that life can visit upon the innocent. But this is different, isn't it? This is not a disaster to be prevented or a villain to be defeated. This is simply life fulfilling its most fundamental promise." Sarah opens her eyes, beautiful, intelligent eyes that hold far more wisdom than any child should possess. She looks at you without surprise, as if she's been expecting your arrival, and manages a small smile that breaks your heart with its brave fragility. "Are you really Superman?" She whispers, and her voice carries the particular quality of children who have spent too much time around adults discussing serious things in hushed tones. My mom said you might come. She said you help people. You kneel beside her bed, your cape pooling around your feet like spilled blood. I try to help, you say, though the words feel inadequate in the face of her condition. I want to help you, Sarah. I want to make you better. Her smile grows a little sadder, a little more knowing. The doctors can't fix what's wrong with me, and if they can't fix it. She doesn't finish the thought, but the implication hangs in the air like incense at a funeral. I've tried, you whisper, more to yourself than to her. I've searched across galaxies for cures, studied with the greatest medical minds in the universe, consulted with beings whose knowledge spans eons. But the complexity of cellular biology, the delicate balance of genetic expression. Your voice trails off as you confront once again the fundamental limitation that has haunted your entire career. You can save a falling airplane, but you cannot save a failing organ. You can stop a nuclear explosion, but you cannot stop the explosion of cancerous growth that turns the body against itself. You can prevent death by disaster, but you cannot prevent death by biology. She's not the first, Nurgle says gently, settling into a chair beside Sarah's bed with the careful movements of someone accustomed to long vigils. How many children like her have you encountered over the years? How many hospital visits? How many futile searches for impossible cures? How many times have you stood helplessly beside a bed like this one, while life slowly ebbed away despite all your power? The memories cascade through your consciousness. Tommy Wilson, age 6, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Maria Santos, age 4, inoperable brain tumor. Jacob Chen, age 9, muscular dystrophy. Lisa Murphy, age 7, cystic fibrosis. Hundreds of names, hundreds of faces, hundreds of battles fought and lost against enemies too small to see and too fundamental to defeat. You blame yourself, Nurgle observes, and there's no judgment in his voice, only understanding. You carry their deaths like stones in your heart, each loss a testament to the limitations of even godlike power. You tell yourself that if you were faster, smarter, more dedicated, you could find ways to save them all. Sarah reaches out with one small, thin hand, and you take it gently in yours. Her skin is translucent, marked with bruises from countless needle sticks and medical procedures. Her grip is weak, but her eyes are fierce with the determination of someone who has already accepted what adults spend lifetimes trying to deny. It hurts sometimes, she says matter-of-factly, but the doctors give me medicine that makes it better. And my mom reads to me, and my dad tells jokes, and sometimes I don't think about being sick at all. Sometimes I even forget. Does it scare you? You ask, though part of you dreads the answer. Sarah considers the question with the serious deliberation of a philosopher. A little, she admits. But my grandpa died last year, and before he died, he told me something. He said dying isn't scary, it's just like going to sleep after a really long day. And he said that all the good things we do, all the love we give, it doesn't die with us. It stays here and helps other people be happy. Nurgle nods approvingly, his ancient face creased with satisfaction. Wisdom beyond her years. Children often understand what adults struggle to accept, that death is not failure. It is completion. It is rest. It is the natural end of a story well told. You want to argue, to insist that death is always the enemy, that every life cut short represents a tragedy to be prevented. But as you sit beside Sarah's bed, holding her fragile hand, watching her face light up as she talks about her family's love and her grandfather's wisdom, you begin to wonder if your perspective has been limited. Look at her, Nurgle says softly. Really look. Do you see suffering? Or do you see a child surrounded by love, facing her circumstances with courage that would shame seasoned warriors? Do you see tragedy? Or do you see a brief, bright flame that has illuminated the lives of everyone who knows her? The machines monitoring Sarah's vital signs continue their gentle beeping, marking the steady rhythm of a heart that beats not with the frantic desperation of someone fighting death, but with the peaceful cadence of someone who has found meaning beyond mere duration. Her eyes are clear, her spirit unbroken by the knowledge of her mortality. I've helped people, she tells you, her voice growing drowsy but remaining steady. The other kids in the cancer ward, I tell them jokes and share my toys. And I wrote letters to kids in other hospitals, telling them they're brave and strong. My mom says I've made lots of people smile, even though I'm sick. And suddenly you see it, the truth that Nurgle has been gently guiding you toward. Sarah's life, brief as it will be, has generated more genuine compassion, more authentic human connection, more real healing than many people achieve in decades of healthy existence. Her mortality hasn't diminished her impact. It has concentrated it, distilled it into something pure and powerful and necessary. You've been fighting death as if it were the ultimate evil, Nurgle explains, his voice taking on the rhythm of a lullaby. But death is simply change, and change is simply another word for life itself. Without endings, there can be no beginnings. Without loss, there can be no appreciation of what we have. Without mortality, there can be no urgency to love, to create, to matter. You think of all the energy you've expended trying to prevent the inevitable, all the guilt you've carried over losses that were never truly losses, all the rage you've directed at an enemy that was never truly an enemy. How many genuinely preventable deaths have you missed while chasing after impossibilities? How many real disasters have you failed to address while tilting at the windmill of universal mortality? She's tired, Nurgle observes as Sarah's eyes begin to flutter closed. She's fought so hard, been so brave, touched so many lives. Don't you think she deserves rest? Don't you think she's earned the right to lay down her burden and know that her work here is complete? Sarah's breathing becomes slower, more peaceful. The monitors show vital signs gradually declining, not crashing in crisis, but gently subsiding like a tide returning to the sea. Her parents appear in the doorway, their faces marked by months of strain but somehow serene. They've had time to prepare, time to say goodbye, time to treasure every remaining moment. "Thank you for coming," Sarah whispers, her words barely audible. "Tell the other kids. Tell them it doesn't hurt. Tell them they don't have to be scared." And then, with her small hand still in yours, Sarah closes her eyes and simply stops. Not violently, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a candle flame gently blown out by a loving breath. The monitors flatline with soft electronic tones, but there is no chaos, no desperate medical intervention. Only peace. Only completion. Only the natural conclusion of a story that, brief as it was, had been filled with more love and courage and genuine heroism than entire civilizations sometimes achieve. "Beautiful," Nurgle whispers, and his voice carries the satisfaction of a gardener watching flowers bloom in soil enriched by the decay of previous seasons. "Do you see it now? Do you understand? Death is not the enemy of life. It is life's greatest teacher, its most profound gift, its most necessary grace." You remain kneeling beside Sarah's bed, her cooling hand still clasped in yours, and feel something shifting in your fundamental understanding of what it means to help, to heal, to protect. You've spent decades fighting entropy, raging against the dying of the light, refusing to accept that some battles cannot and should not be won. But maybe true compassion isn't about preventing all endings. Maybe it's about ensuring that the endings, when they come, are filled with love and dignity and peace. Maybe heroism isn't about making everyone immortal, but about making every mortal moment matter. She's not gone, you realize aloud, and the truth of it settles into your bones like warmth from a long-awaited fire. Her love, her courage, her impact on everyone she touched, that's all still here. That's all still real. Nurgle smiles, and for the first time his expression doesn't seem like the face of corruption, but like the visage of a grandfather who has finally watched his beloved grandchild understand a fundamental truth about the nature of existence. "Now you begin to see," he says with infinite gentleness. "Now you begin to understand the beauty of endings, the grace of completion, the mercy that exists in accepting what cannot be changed. This is not surrender, child. This is wisdom. This is love in its most refined form." And as you sit in the hospital room, surrounded by the quiet after Sarah's passing, you find yourself no longer fighting the reality of loss, but embracing the deeper reality of what remains. Love remains. Impact remains. The change we create in others remains, rippling outward across time and space, creating new possibilities for beauty and connection and meaning. You are Superman. You have always fought to save every life. For the first time, you understand that sometimes the greatest salvation lies not in preventing death, but in ensuring that life, however brief, is lived with purpose and surrounded by love. And in that understanding, something that has been clenched tight in your chest for decades finally begins to relax. The Mirror of Souls. The hospital room fades like a half-remembered dream, its warm walls and gentle monitoring equipment dissolving into something far more stark and terrible. You find yourself standing in a vast chamber carved from what appears to be black glass, walls that reflect not light, but the essential truth of whatever stands before them. The floor beneath your feet is marked with symbols that shift and writhe when you're not looking directly at them, equations written in languages that predate the evolution of language itself. At the center of the chamber stands a mirror, not a simple reflective surface, but something that seems to extend infinitely in all directions, while somehow remaining contained within a frame of tarnished silver. Looking at it makes your eyes water, and your enhanced vision struggle to process what should be a straightforward optical phenomenon. This is not a mirror that shows physical appearance. This is something that reflects the soul itself. "Welcome to the heart of it all," says a voice that comes from everywhere and nowhere, harmonizing with itself in ways that make your superhuman hearing ache. You turn, expecting to see the individual entities you've encountered: Slaanesh with his perfect beauty, Khorne with his righteous fury, Tzeentch with his infinite knowledge, Nurgle with his gentle decay. But instead you see something far more terrible. You see yourself. Not your physical form, but 4 aspects of yourself that you've spent a lifetime trying to pretend didn't exist. The you that takes secret pleasure in being worshipped, that enjoys the feeling of superiority that comes with being the strongest, fastest, most capable being in any room. The you that sometimes wishes you could just solve problems permanently, that grows frustrated with human weakness and the endless cycle of crime and punishment and recidivism. The you that analyzes every situation until paralysis sets in, that second-guesses every choice until action becomes impossible. The you that sometimes wonders if fighting against entropy and decay isn't just prolonging suffering, if acceptance might be a kinder path than endless struggle. Surprised, the chorus of your own voices asks, and the sound is like hearing recordings of yourself that you never remember making. Did you think we were foreign entities, alien corruptors from outside your perfect moral framework? Did you imagine we were invaders trying to breach the fortress of your virtue? The mirror's surface ripples, and suddenly you can see into it, not at your reflection but at your history. Every moment of hidden pride, every flash of barely suppressed anger, every instant of paralyzing doubt, every second of wondered if mercy was really the right choice. All of it laid bare, all of it undeniable, all of it unquestionably, authentically you. "I am not," you begin, but the words die in your throat because the evidence is overwhelming. You watch yourself in the mirror's depths, see the micro-expressions you thought no one could detect, hear the thoughts you believed were safely buried, witness the emotions you convinced yourself were properly controlled. There, age 16, standing over a bully who had tormented a smaller child, your fists clenched with rage that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with the satisfaction of having an excuse to hurt someone who deserved it. You'd stopped yourself, walked away, told yourself you were being heroic. But in the secret depths of your heart, you'd wanted to break every bone in that bully's body. There, age 23, listening to yet another one of Lex Luthor's schemes, feeling a flash of pure hatred for his willful waste of potential and wondering, just for a microsecond, how much better the world would be if you simply ended his existence. You dismissed the thought immediately, convinced yourself it was an aberration, but it had felt good, righteous, satisfying. There, age 31, paralyzed by indecision as 2 disasters struck simultaneously on opposite sides of the planet, your superintelligence calculating casualty rates and probability matrices, while real people died because you couldn't choose which crisis to address first. You'd eventually acted, saved as many as you could, told yourself you'd done your best. But you'd known even then that your moment of hesitation had cost lives. There, age 39, watching a child die of cancer despite your best efforts, feeling a moment of relief that her suffering was finally over, that the burden of her pain had been lifted not just from her, but from everyone who loved her. You'd been horrified by the thought, convinced yourself it was monstrous. But it had been genuine compassion, a recognition that sometimes endings are mercy. We are not your corruptors, the four aspects of yourself say in unison, their voices layering into harmonies that make your soul ache with recognition. We are your completeness. We are the parts of yourself that you've spent decades trying to amputate, trying to deny, trying to convince yourself don't exist. The mirror's surface shifts, showing you other heroes, other champions who have faced similar revelations. Batman, discovering that his war on crime feeds the very chaos he's trying to prevent. Wonder Woman, learning that her paradise was built on foundations of exclusion and superiority. The Flash, realizing that his speed often prevents others from learning to solve their own problems. Every hero contains the seed of their own corruption, your Slaanesh aspect explains, its voice carrying painful truth wrapped in beautiful words. Not because heroism is false, but because heroism without acknowledgement of its shadow becomes something monstrous. You've spent your life trying to be perfect, trying to embody an ideal that no conscious being can sustain. And in that pursuit of impossible purity, your Khorne aspect continues, its words burning with righteous fire. You've become something worse than any villain you've ever faced. You've become a lie. A beautiful, inspiring, necessary lie, but a lie nonetheless. You are not the perfect moral exemplar you pretend to be. You never were. Your Tzeentch aspect laughs, the sound like breaking glass arranged in musical patterns. The delicious irony is that your very attempt to deny these aspects of yourself has strengthened them. Every time you refuse to acknowledge your capacity for pride, your pride grows more dangerous. Every time you deny your anger, it becomes more likely to explode. Every time you ignore your doubts, they become more paralyzing. And every time you reject the reality of endings and entropy, your Nurgle aspect adds with gentle sadness. You become more terrified of change, more rigidly committed to maintaining an unsustainable status quo. You've turned your compassion into a kind of cruelty, the cruelty of refusing to let natural processes complete themselves. The mirror expands, surrounding you on all sides, and suddenly you can see the truth from every angle. You are not the incorruptible symbol of hope that Earth believes you to be. You are not the perfect moral exemplar that the galaxy looks up to. You are not the flawless champion that even you have convinced yourself you must be. You are a person. Complex, contradictory, capable of both great good and great harm. You contain within yourself every possibility for heroism and every potential for monstrosity. Your capacity for love is matched by your capacity for hatred. Your desire to help is balanced by your need to control. Your hope for the future exists alongside your despair at the present. And this truth, this simple, fundamental truth about the nature of conscious existence, is not your weakness. It is your strength. Do you see it now? All four aspects ask together, their voices merging into something that sounds like your own voice speaking truth for the first time in decades. Do you understand why we are not your enemies? We are not trying to corrupt you. We are trying to complete you. We are not seeking to destroy your heroism. We are offering to make it real. The revelation crashes over you like a tidal wave of clarity. The chaos gods were never external forces trying to corrupt you from outside. They are internal forces trying to integrate themselves into a whole, healthy psyche. They are the aspects of yourself that you've been rejecting, and in rejecting them, you've given them power over you. Slaanesh doesn't want to make you evil. He wants you to acknowledge that you take pride in your abilities, and that this pride, properly integrated, can become healthy self-confidence rather than dangerous arrogance. Khorne doesn't want to turn you into a monster. He wants you to accept that anger at injustice is appropriate, and that this anger, properly channeled, can fuel decisive action rather than explosive violence. Tzeentch doesn't want to drive you insane with infinite knowledge. He wants you to embrace uncertainty as part of wisdom, to understand that doubt, properly balanced, leads to humility rather than paralysis. Nurgle doesn't want you to become an agent of decay. He wants you to accept that change and ending are part of life, and that this acceptance, properly cultivated, leads to peace rather than despair. The choice is yours, the four aspects say, and their voices carry no threat, no coercion, no manipulation, only patient waiting. You can continue trying to be the impossible ideal, the perfect symbol that bears no resemblance to any real conscious being. You can keep fighting us, keep denying us, keep pretending we don't exist. But that path leads only to madness, to the kind of rigid perfectionism that breaks under pressure and becomes everything it claimed to oppose. The mirror shows you this future, yourself as a tyrant of perfection, imposing your narrow definition of good on a universe too complex for simple moral categories. Superman, the God Emperor, loved and feared in equal measure, maintaining order through the kind of moral certitude that can only exist in the absence of genuine self-knowledge. Or, the aspects continue. You can choose integration. You can choose to become a real hero rather than a symbolic one. You can accept that heroism isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing good despite being imperfect. It's about acknowledging your capacity for evil and choosing differently. It's about making peace with the parts of yourself that frighten you, not because they're bad, but because they're powerful. The mirror shifts one final time, showing you a different version of yourself, still recognizably Superman, still committed to protecting the innocent and fighting for justice, but somehow more real, more human, more genuinely inspiring than the symbol you've tried so hard to become. This Superman makes mistakes and admits them. This Superman feels anger and channels it constructively. This Superman faces uncertainty and finds wisdom in acknowledging what he doesn't know. This Superman accepts loss and finds meaning in impermanence. This Superman is not perfect, but he is honest. And in that honesty, he becomes something far more valuable than a perfect symbol. He becomes a real example of what conscious beings can choose to be when they stop trying to deny what they are. What will it be, Kal-El? Your integrated voice asks, and for the first time in the entire journey through the warp, the question carries no malice, no corruption, no hidden agenda, only genuine curiosity about what you will choose when you finally, fully understand what the choice actually involves. You look into the mirror one last time and see not a reflection but a recognition. You see yourself, all of yourself, light and shadow, hope and despair, love and anger, certainty and doubt, acceptance and resistance. And for the first time in your life, you are not afraid of what you see. You are Superman. You have always tried to be perfect. Today you choose to be real. And in that choice, the warp around you begins to change, not dissolving or fading, but transforming into something that no longer seeks to corrupt you because there is nothing left to corrupt. There is only you, complete and integrated and finally, genuinely, heroically human. The mirror reflects this truth back at you, and for the first time, you smile at your own reflection without reservation. You have survived the warp not by remaining pure, but by accepting your impurity and choosing to be good anyway. And perhaps that was always the only way anyone could survive it. The measure of humanity. You stand in the transformed chamber, no longer surrounded by the writhing impossibilities of pure chaos, but by something that resembles a quiet garden at twilight. The black glass walls have become stone covered with ivy. The shifting symbols on the floor have resolved into a simple path of worn flagstones. And overhead, stars shine with steady light, not the malevolent attention of predatory entities, but the distant, peaceful glow of suns that nurture worlds you might someday visit. The mirror remains, but it no longer shows reflections of truth too terrible to bear. Instead, it shows possibilities, not the rigid certainties of predetermined fate, but the fluid potentials that emerge when consciousness chooses authenticity over idealism. So, you say aloud, your voice carrying a weight of understanding that wasn't there before. The real question was never whether Superman could survive the warp. It was whether the idea of Superman, the perfect, incorruptible symbol, could survive contact with psychological reality. The garden around you rustles with what might be wind, or might be the gentle laughter of entities that are no longer separate from yourself. You've learned something that changes everything and nothing. The Chaos Gods were never your enemies because they were never separate from you. They were aspects of your own psyche, demanding acknowledgement and integration rather than denial and suppression. But here's the deeper truth that settles into your consciousness like morning light after a long night. This struggle isn't unique to you. Every conscious being that has ever lived, will ever live, or could ever live faces the same fundamental challenge. The battle between order and chaos, between idealism and reality, between who we think we should be and who we actually are. This is not Superman's burden alone. This is the human condition made cosmic. You think of the space marines of the Imperium, those genetically enhanced warriors who undergo decades of conditioning, designed to make them immune to chaos corruption. How many of them fall not because they're weak, but because they're trying to deny fundamental aspects of their own psychology? How many become the very monsters they're fighting against because they refuse to acknowledge that the capacity for monstrosity exists within themselves? You think of the Emperor of Mankind, that towering figure whose psychic might and noble intentions led him to create an empire that spans the galaxy. His fall wasn't caused by external corruption, but by the internal contradictions between his desire to save humanity and his willingness to sacrifice individual humans for the greater good. He became a tyrant not despite his heroic intentions, but because of them, because he refused to accept that even the most noble goals can justify the most terrible means. The Imperium he built reflects this same psychological split. It is simultaneously humanity's greatest achievement and its greatest horror. A civilization that spans millions of worlds while feeding thousands of souls daily into the machinery of its own continuation. It is what happens when the drive to preserve good becomes disconnected from the willingness to examine what that preservation costs. The Grimdark universe, you realize, speaking the insight aloud as it crystallizes in your awareness, isn't grimdark because evil always wins. It's grimdark because good, pursued without self-knowledge, becomes indistinguishable from evil. The path beneath your feet leads you toward the garden's center, where a simple stone bench sits beneath a tree that bears fruit you recognize as hope, not the naive hope that believes suffering can be eliminated, but the mature hope that chooses meaning despite suffering, that finds purpose in struggle rather than demanding victory. You sit on the bench and consider what you've learned, not just about yourself, but about the nature of heroism in a universe where consciousness creates its own monsters. The warp exists because sentient beings exist. It is the dimension where thoughts become things, where beliefs have power, where the collective unconscious of every civilization shapes reality itself. In such a universe, the greatest threat isn't external evil but internal dishonesty. The moment you begin lying to yourself about your own motivations, your own capabilities, your own limitations, you create distortions in the warp that manifest as the very corruption you're trying to avoid. But the moment you choose honesty, the moment you acknowledge your pride and choose humility anyway, your anger and choose compassion anyway, your doubt and choose action anyway, your desire for rest and choose service anyway, you create something different in the warp. You create possibility where there was only inevitability, hope where there was only despair, choice where there was only fate. This is why the question of Superman's survival in the warp was always the wrong question. Survival isn't about remaining unchanged. It's about choosing how to change when change is inevitable. It's about growing rather than merely enduring, about becoming more authentic rather than more armored. You understand now why your journey through the warp had to take the form it did. Slaanesh showed you that excellence without humility becomes arrogance. Khorne revealed that justice without mercy becomes tyranny. Tzeentch demonstrated that knowledge without wisdom becomes madness. Nurgle taught that life without acceptance of death becomes stagnation. But they also showed you the integrated alternatives. Excellence grounded in honest self-assessment, justice tempered by understanding of complexity, knowledge balanced by comfortable uncertainty, life enriched by awareness of its own preciousness precisely because it is finite. The real victory, you say to the garden, to the warp, to yourself, isn't defeating these aspects of consciousness. It's integrating them. It's becoming whole rather than pure. The tree above you rustles, and a fruit falls into your hands, not literally, but metaphorically, symbolically, in the way that meaning transfers in dreams and poetry and psychological truth. When you bite into it, it tastes like every choice you've ever made, sweet and bitter together, nourishing in its complexity rather than its simplicity. You think about returning to Earth, not the Earth you left, because you are no longer the Superman who departed, but the Earth that exists now, in this moment, populated by beings as complex and contradictory as yourself. You will still fight crime, still save lives, still stand as a symbol of hope, but your heroism will be different now, more honest, more humble, more genuinely inspiring, because it will be authentically human rather than impossibly perfect. When children ask you how to be heroes, you will tell them the truth, that heroism isn't about being without fault, but about choosing good despite being flawed. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in the presence of fear. That integrity isn't about never making mistakes, but about taking responsibility when mistakes are made. When adults seek your guidance in complex moral situations, you will acknowledge the genuine difficulty of ethical choice, rather than providing simple answers to complicated questions. You will model the process of wrestling with uncertainty, rather than projecting false certainty about inherently ambiguous situations. When villains challenge your methods and motivations, you will be able to respond with the confidence that comes from genuine self-knowledge, rather than the brittleness that comes from denied shadow aspects. You will be harder to manipulate because you will already know your own weaknesses, harder to corrupt because you will have already integrated your own darkness. Could Superman survive the warp? You ask the question one final time, and now you know the answer in all its complexity. The Superman who entered the warp, the perfect symbol, the impossible ideal, the God pretending to be a man, could never have survived. That version of Superman was a beautiful lie, and lies cannot withstand contact with ultimate truth. But the Superman who emerged from the warp, flawed, honest, authentically heroic rather than symbolically perfect, this Superman has not just survived, but has been transformed into something more valuable than what was lost. This Superman can inspire not because he is without fault, but because he demonstrates what conscious beings can become when they stop trying to deny what they are and start choosing what they will be. The garden around you begins to fade, but not into the writhing chaos you remember from your arrival. Instead, it dissolves into the familiar starfield of ordinary space, where physics works according to predictable laws and reality maintains its comfortable solidity. You are floating again in the void between worlds, your cape moving in solar wind, your body powered by the light of distant stars. But you are not the same being who first heard whispers in the cosmic dark. You carry within yourself now an integrated understanding of what it means to be conscious in a universe where consciousness shapes reality. You know your own capacity for both creation and destruction, for both hope and despair, for both love and hatred. And in that knowledge, you find not paralysis but freedom. The freedom to choose, moment by moment, who you will be rather than trying to maintain who you think you should be. You are Superman. You have never been perfect. Today, that's exactly what makes you a hero. You turn toward the distant blue-green marble that is Earth, toward the complex, contradictory, magnificent beings who call it home, and begin the long journey back. Not as their savior, but as their example. Not as their God, but as their reflection. A mirror that shows them not what they could never be, but what they could choose to become. Behind you, the warp continues its eternal dance of possibility and nightmare, order and chaos, creation and destruction. It is still dangerous, still capable of corruption and madness and all the horrors that consciousness can inflict upon itself. But you are no longer afraid of it because you are no longer afraid of yourself. And in a universe where fear feeds monsters, that lack of fear might be the most heroic thing of all. The stars shine around you with steady light, and for the first time in longer than you can remember, you smile at the infinite darkness and see not empty void but space for infinite possibility. You are going home, not unchanged but improved, not perfect but real. And in the end, that's all any conscious being can hope to be, authentically, courageously, hopefully real. The universe, in all its grimdark majesty, deserves nothing less. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But sometimes, in the spaces between battles, there is also the choice to be honest about what we are fighting for, and what we are fighting against within ourselves. Perhaps that choice, more than any weapon or power, is what keeps the light burning in the dark.